the commencement of the Standing Committee on Finance at the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, where we are commencing our meeting. I wish to welcome all the members. I wish to welcome the Minister of Finance, Ms. Deirdre Bartman, and the finance team and the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board team to this meeting. I am Leon van Wyk. I'm the chair of the Standing Committee. With me, I have Ms. Zahida Adams, the procedural officer. For purposes of the record, I'm going to ask our honourable members of the committee just to introduce themselves, and thereafter we will hand over to Minister Bartman for her introductions and for that of the team. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Hi.
Dave Bryant, member of the committee.
Afternoon, Chair. Noko Masipa, member of the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Khalil Brankish, member of the committee. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair. My
Frankie
name.
Bombo. Oh, sorry. Bombo, Nama French.
Afternoon, I'm Nomin Kondlo.
Afternoon, Chair. I'm Beauty Stoffel, alternate member of the committee.
Right, I think with that, thank you very much. Welcome to the committee members, and I'm going to hand over to Minister Bartman. Welcome to this meeting of the Finance Committee.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm going to ask that the members from the board just introduce themselves. And then there are a few persons from the Provincial Treasury policy team in this regard that is also in attendance. And then I'll just ask them to introduce themselves as well. And then we can jump straight into the presentation, given that it's quite highly technical and focuses majority on the corporate social responsibility investments and the disputes questions that the committee has asked of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. I think over to the Gambling Board team, just to do some introductions from their side.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair. This is the Deputy Chair, Mervyn Burton. I'm standing in for Claude Bassaday, the Chair of the Board. He's unfortunately can't make it today. We're in the boardroom. I have two other board members with me, Mr. Nick Nichols and Mr. Sogan Chetty, and the Head of ICT, Alvin Matthews, Head of Compliance, Robin Bennett, Head of Licensing, Mr. Zim Solo, and the CEO, Prima Aikens, and our legal, Head of Legal, Liesel Hartman. So we're all sitting in the boardroom at the Gambling Board, and good afternoon to you, the Minister and the members, and we will then flag the presentation, and Robin Bennett, Head of Compliance, is going to actually take us through the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And I think you can proceed then with the presentation and flight that and talk us through that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation deals with the two questions, one in respect of the CSI contributions and the other one relates to patent dispute. With respect to the CSI, we're going to start off by indicating that the board is classified as a Schedule C public entity in terms of the PFMA. The board receives a grant from the Western Cape Provincial Government to supplement its own generated revenue and to address budgetary shortfalls. As a result, the financial resources available to the board constitute public funds. In line with applicable legislative and funding constraints, the board is not permitted to use these public funds for CSI initiatives. Consequently, the board has not undertaken any CSI-funded projects during the 24-25 financial year, as well as the 25 and 26 financial years. License holder spending trends in respect of CSI over the past 2 years. The casino and LPM sectors operate under mandatory CSI requirements, which is linked to their GGR, gross gaming revenue. As GGR fluctuates annually, CSI contributions naturally vary from year to year. The betting sector does not have a prescribed CSI obligation. The board is actively addressing this regulatory gap. The Office of Board is advancing work to introduce CSI contributions for bookmakers. Once implemented, these contributions will formally be incorporated into future annual reports. Voluntary CSI from the betting sector are not based on a defined methodology and which creates significant variability and make consistent verification challenging. In the 23-24 annual report, the reflected CSI contributions was indicated as 30.7 million, which includes 11.8 million in voluntary contributions from the betting sector. In the 24-25 financial years, those voluntary contributions from the betting sector were omitted, and we only reflected the mandatory contributions, CSI contributions from the LPM and casino sectors, and this amounts to just under 60 million rand. The CSI contribution by license holders include the following, but it's not limited to support for high schools and primary schools. There seems to be a lot of focus on assisting schools, specifically in the areas in which these license holders operate. They also provide bursaries to students to pursue studies at tertiary institutions, provide assistance to ECD institutions, including equipment and partial funding of staff salaries, support of the Smart Foundation through provision of equipment and learning aids, funding of equipment for the Woodside Special Care Center, contributions towards supporting 16 Days of Activism campaign for teen girls, resource support for 2025 Cancer Shave-a-thon, funding of specific projects for the Reach for the Dream Foundation, support for the Langeberg elderly community through community-based initiatives, provision of resources for the Langeberg Feed the Need program, operational and day-to-day support for old age homes, operational assistance for the Lead Foundation. Also included are funding which was made to the Worcester Muslim School through the provision of school equipment, funding to assist local tourism board with initiative, contributions to disaster relief efforts, including both financial support and essential goods, assistance to individuals affected by the Bishop Labour Fire through targeted funding, operational support for the Be the Difference Foundation, funding the Breadline Africa in support of its core operational needs, equipment and feeding scheme, support for SOS Children's Villages, financial support for the annual Festival of Giving event, operational contributions to Rise Against Hunger, support for the Wildlife and Environmental Society of South Africa through funding of operational requirements, assistance to NSRI contributions through operational expenses. Chair, these are some of the type of organizations which the license holders fund. I'm not sure of the any questions relating to the CSI, or should I move directly over to the patent disputes?
I think what we'll just take some questions after the conclusion of the presentation and then try and deal with all the questions at once at that stage. Thanks. You can proceed.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the queries related to patent disputes, the request was the number of patent dispute, the number of patent complaints received against gambling institutions over the past 2 years, and the turnaround times for resolving these cases and steps taken to resolve the complaints. Chair, let me indicate firstly that patent dispute and complaints have increased ever since COVID. It's during that period where people migrated from the land-based gambling institutions going to online. This upward trend continued to grow specifically in the betting activity, which does the online. The average annual dispute complaints over the past 2 years in the various sectors is within the casinos, with 7 LPMs, 2, and in the betting sector is 700. On average, disputes are resolved within 3 to 6 months, except in exceptional circumstances where additional complexities exist. These do take a bit longer. There's a number of factors which influence the duration of the dispute resolution, the viability and completeness of the information. Multiple transactions does delay that because we have to wait on information, responsiveness of involved parties, and that could be from the license holder, the patent, and also from third party. verification of information received, the quality of the submission, because we have to check for correctness and accuracy, and at times historical or archive data retrieval, that also takes a bit of time. With the most significant being the capacity constraints within the board to manage these matters effectively. It is only recently that additional staff was approved for the board and the impact of these staff is not yet evident, but we hope to see that within the next couple of months. The process relating to the dispute resolution, patent dispute is formally lodged with the board. The matter is recorded in our official dispute register. It is assigned to an investigator who manages the case. The investigator engages the patent to obtain the required information. Which enables them to personal gameplay information from the license holder when necessary. The complaint is submitted to the license holder for formal response. The step may take time, particularly historical archive information must be retrieved or play tracking information. The investigator inspects all the information received from both patron and the license holder. This may include machine-related checks and follow-up questions relevant to employees and patrons. A detailed investigation report is prepared for the investigator and reviewed by supervisor. The complete file is then submitted after gone through the process internally to the legal manager who has the delegation to resolve and patent disputes. Legal services evaluates the investigation material and issues a formal written finding, which is communicated with both patron and the license holder. Either party has the right to appeal within the 14-day period. Now, the board is looking at the turnaround time and the measures that we have, we are implementing to reduce that is that realignment of the department structure. This is to enable the redeployment of resources towards dispute management functions, because as you indicated previously, we do notice it is on the increase. Appointment of dedicated personnel to handle disputes, noting that patrons may originate from anywhere in South Africa, requiring broader operational coverage. Previously, disputes were handled by individuals who at times was also assigned to conduct compliance inspection and audit from license holders. We're now shifting that to dedicated staff. We are looking at consideration of legislative amendments specifically to the betting rules, which we will now require license holders to have a dispute resolution process, which is approved by the board, together with the terms and conditions of license holders, which was previously reviewed by the board, but now is going to be approved by the board. We also are strengthening engagement with license holders, because we do find that in many instances, if we engage with license holders on common issues or the issues which sometimes delay matters in terms of resolution of disputes, they are very more likely to address those things from their side. Not everything needs to be changed in legislation to achieve certain results. At the moment, we are seeing some improvement in the turnaround times. This is specifically because we've appointed two individuals on a temporary basis. Both individuals have collectively have over 25 years experience, and the full impact of their work would basically be seen in, like I said, in the next couple of months. The question might be, so what do we do when these people have left? This is what we're addressing at the moment is, while they are there only on a temporary basis, they are specifically there to deal with the backlog. With additional staff that we have employed, we do believe that if we should just be dealing with current matters, we would be in a position to have our turnaround times much quicker than what it currently is. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm sure that the members will probably have a number of questions that we could open up for. I'm not sure if there are any comments at this stage that Minister, that you or Provincial Treasury may have it before we go over to questions.
None, Chairperson. The matters regarding the disputes as well as the corporate social investments are in line with our respective legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And so I'm sort of looking for any hands from members who may want to ask any questions here. To me, on the one side, just thinking of the CSI, if one perhaps had some form of split or percentage allocation into the nature and the types of spending that was given there, that would probably be quite interesting on the one aspect. And then if we're looking at the complaints and the number of complaints that are referred to, if one does a rough exercise, it's probably around about 14 per week. So you're probably talking in the range of 50 or something over 50 per month that need to be dealt with. And, just trying to think, on that level of work pressure that it creates. And then the nature of those complaints, if there are any particular trends that are coming through, and that level of communication that goes back to the complainant. Perhaps we could have some comments on that, but I see Honourable Masipa and then Honourable Petrus, and perhaps when Honourable Petrus just speaks, he can introduce himself as well. Thank you. Over to you.
Chairperson, thank you. I do pick up some noise. Maybe, okay, I see it's muted. Can the board mute their mic?
Yes, that appears to be
Chairperson?
done now.
Okay. Chairperson, I'm covered. I just want to say thank you to the board and the work that is being done in terms of SCI. We did visit some of their projects in the Western Cape, in Kailicha. In the city of Cape Town, so to say, in Kailicha, and I think in Mitchell's Plain as well. So really, I just want to commend them on the work that they are doing. But I think the question is there maybe a breakdown in terms of these complaints that they have been handling, and what is the trend telling them in terms of the kind of breakdown that they are picking up from the complaints that they have received from the license holders? Yeah, that's the question that I have from my side, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Masipa. Yes, I think, in line with your question there, if one can perhaps just get an idea if it is, there's a trend towards certain particular license holders, if one is finding that, a few of them are the generators of most of the complaints, or whether complaints are fairly widespread. So that would be quite interesting to just gain that level of perspective. Member Petrus.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. I'm a member of your committee, the Finance Standing Committee. Chair, it is in relation to the allocations to schools and other institutions. Is it possible that we have the individual amount that was allocated to those different institutions and schools and individuals? And then was it spread equally throughout the Western Cape?
Okay, is that the conclusion there of your comments, Member Petrus?
Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. Then Member Nkondlo. You can go ahead. I see you're still muted.
Am I audible, Chair? What's going on
Yes,
with
you're
my-
audible. You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. Chair, just few issues, man. I just wanted to understand on the CSI. One, it's indicated that the betting industry is still, its regulations are still not concluded. So in the interim, in that scenario, what then gives rise to any donations or contribution that the betting industry would have done, or if it is doing? And is there any record in this period where the betting industry would have made any donations? Also, what is the relationship of the regulations for CSI with the King Codes of Practice of general business as set out in South Africa and globally, with the specific legislation in South Africa or such regulations? So if you can just explain to me just that legislative and policy clarity, which pieces of legislation and also how do they link with the King Codes of Good Practice that dictates how corporates, understanding that industries or betting at this point does not have regulations in this regard. I hope I'm making sense. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Nkondlo. I'm just quickly looking to see if there are any other members' hands that are up, other than Member Stoffel. I see your video appears to be pointed at the ceiling. If you could perhaps just turn your video off. Then with that, I'll hand over to Minister and the Gambling and Racing Board team then for responses.
Chair, the board can deal with the technical matters as they're all technical, but if there is anything on the policy side that I need to address afterwards, then I'll come in to sweep those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister. Chair, I'm going to ask the members the Exco. We can start off with Robin, see if we can answer most of them. There will be some questions on the questions itself, just for clarity. But Robin, let's see what you can answer, and then if one of the other members can answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Let me start with the CSI first. On the request for the CSI specific spend per school, if that is the request, that is something that we can obtain because the license holder do provide us the actual amounts that we do send to the different schools. So if it's only for schools, that is something that the office will be able to provide for the 2 financial years. In terms of the question, is the CSI spent throughout the Western Cape? The board do not prescribe who and where you need to spend your CSI. What the board does do in terms of a quarterly engagement with the license holder where these matters are discussed, the board encourages license holders firstly to support organizations which is sustainable. That's the first thing. And second of all is for them to try to support organizations specifically in the area in which they operate. So that is what we've seen from license holders. Where the board does pick up, they might have a concern regarding spend in a particular area or a particular project those are things that we do engage with license holders as and when those things do arrive. But in terms of some of the license holders, their CSI spend is going through trust, which they form. So the trust deed, which is a document which the board also approved, will set up exactly in what area and what the CSI can be on. Each license holder will also have what we call a discretionary amount, which they will also just keep in reserve for in case of any type of disaster which happened within the Western Cape, and then they are very quick to fund those disasters. So I'm not sure exactly how that answers the question where it goes throughout the Western Cape, but if you're going to ask in each region of the Western Cape, no, that is not the case, but it's generally in the areas in which these license holders operate. In terms of the question regarding what gives rise to the discretionary CSI contributions of betting, well, betting are organizations or companies as well. So they have their own CSI initiatives that they want to do. Those are the type of things that they send to the board. But the big question is, so why does others have discretionary, why does the betting have discretionary and CS, casino and LPMs have an obligation or requirement to pay that is? You just got to look at the history of those things. When the LPM and casino sector start, all of them, when they applied for a license, was not an application. It was a competitive bid process. Now, in that competitive bid processes, you have to also indicate what your various things you're going to do, and one of that is what your CSI spend was going to be. So when the casino and the route operators in the LPM sector got their licenses, whatever your bid commitment was then translated into license conditions, and that's embedded in their license conditions. When the board started operating in 1970s, unfortunately, the bookmakers were operating already because they were in existence already. As time went on, we obviously decided that we needed to put some CSI into place for them. There has been discussions with the license holders, but we haven't reached a stage where we are ready to implement. There is also further discussions to decide whether this approach needs to be done on a national basis, specifically because bookmakers operate more nationally than the land-based operations in the Western Cape Chair. Yeah, that is my responses on the CSI. I'm not sure, should I go to the patent disputes?
Let's just see. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. In terms of the patent disputes, one of the questions is do we feel that the patent disputes are aligned or out of sync with everything about specific operators? If you look at the tax that we collect from one particular bookmaker, you will also notice that that is the same bookmaker that has the most disputes, but it's not out of line in terms of the number of transactions. So we do not believe that there is anything untoward in terms of the number of disputes by patent. However, you would find times that if a particular sporting event, there was a glitch or something, at any time, if you get a number of disputes coming to the board about the same matter. So that is the only thing, but we are mindful of that. In terms of the type of trends that we're having, generally at this point in time, it relates to people who believe that won when they should not have won, and then we obviously have to provide them with information. But the most recurring thing is the figure requirements. We have some issues in terms of what we call is responsible gambling, problem gambling issues, and then also other things that we do have is sometimes where people are requesting account closures. Just to talk on the figure requirements is, previously, before the FIC introduced the risk-based approach, they had a rule-based approach, which means that at the minute of onboarding a client, you would have to do that person's figure verification, because that is when the business relationship with the client started. When the FIC moved over to a risk-based approach, so all licensed holders now only need to submit a risk compliance management program, which indicates at what point in time they determine the risk and when they're going to take action. So as a result of that is the majority, if not all, bookmakers in South Africa have shifted the onboarding process, meaning that is onboarding as a client is very easy. So you just need to do the bare minimum to become to get an account holder. The issue comes when you need to now withdraw your funds. Now they start with the FIC process. So your withdrawal out of the account is suspended until such time that you submitted your documents. Now then they believe they submitted the documents and the license holder don't believe it's adequate, then those things come to the board and we have to look at that. As the board was removed as a supervisory body of the FIC, it has been a bit difficult to manage that. We recently signed an MOU with the FIC, so we will be engaging with them on that particular aspect because it's something that is not unique to the Western Cape only, it is in other provinces. In terms of the responsible problem gambling issues, we do find that many times people have played more than they should have played, and then they come to the board and they look for a couple of excuses as to why they believe they won or should not have lost. As much as we know that information right up front is, we have to go through the whole investigation process to prove to them that we've looked at all aspects, but these things also take time. So those are the type of things that we got to look at. And then also in terms of account closures, That is something new that has come up now, is where people are requesting account closures and license holders are indicating there's a certain process they have to follow, which we do not believe should be the case. We will have made some amendments to our general rules, which is very close to publication, which would require account closures to be should be able to be automatically, meaning the client will be able to do that themselves. And then the other big one, which is something slightly out of our hands, is the exclusion process. With the absence of the National Exclusion Register, which the NGB has indicated they're now in the process of finalizing the regulations, many punters believe they had an exclusion, but they didn't go through the entire process. And once they excluded, they find themselves played by another bookmaker. And once they've lost, they've come to the board and said, well, they have an exclusion in place. Now, all of a sudden, they would want all their money back. The other matter, which is also becoming up quite a bit now, is some of the not so responsible statements made by the National Gambling Board, where they try to imply that the betting that is offered by licensed bookmakers is not legal and it's illegal. As a result of that, punters are also coming to the board and requesting that they now need to have all their funds that they've spent and paid back to them. On that particular matter, the board is in the process of communicating with NGB, because the last letter came out on or around the 26th or 27th of February. So we are just responding to them on that, and then we will engage further on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. Chair, I just want to get some clarity from, through you, Chair, Member Conlaw. You asked a question around the King Code. Are we maybe talking about BBE code? Trying to get clarity there so we can respond.
No, I was talking about the King codes of good practice for companies.
Oh, the King Code, okay.
The corporate governance code.
Yes, yes, I understand. Thanks, Chair. We don't, Robin, we don't report on the King Code and so on. We don't actually report on that, but however we do on the BBE code, yes, definitely we do assess that. But the King Code, no, we don't. That will be assessed, I think, on application. In any event, through the processes of whether they are solvent, etc. Before we issue licenses. There's a whole host of boxes that they need to tick. The due diligence is done on the companies that do apply. Thanks. Thanks, Chair. I think that's all from us. I don't know if there's any other questions, comments.
Thank you very much there. I'm just looking to members to see if we've dealt with all aspects that member and questions that members may have. I see Member Nkondlo's hand. You can go ahead.
Chair, my follow-up, I could not hear the speaker properly because I think where he is, it had an echo. So I'm not sure. I think the response that reference to the CSI would be the BBE. And my understanding of the BBE is that corporate social investment is 1% net profit after tax. That is my understanding. And I would want to check whether that is the understanding on which the board utilizes, because I think on one hand, the speaker was saying, as the board, it does not prescribe to companies. But my understanding is that the BBE is prescriptive on what is CSI contribution, of companies. It will be 1% net profit after tax. That's one. And I'm not relating it to betting or any. That my understanding is that all BE compliant companies would need to be guided by this understanding of BBE. And that's the reason I was asking, because I'm assuming the regulations we're talking about would mean that currently there isn't regulations to give effect to that particular triple BE legislation and what it provides. And if correct, then the legislation that in any way or what would be guiding any company on corporate social investment in the absence of the regulations from the triple BE or any other legislation within the gambling space would then be the king code of good practice, because whilst they are not prescriptive, but they require that companies do contribute to, as part of their social and social and ethics sort of responsibility. So that's why I wanted to understand what is this legislative and policy environment that actually give guidance. So I was trying to understand that, because I was missing to understand, I think the colleague as he was explaining, and if I've missed it, I would even request if the board can just provide, a written explanation of the legislative, regulatory, prescripts that anchor CSI for the licensees of the board. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Mkondo. Yes, I think that is quite relevant in terms of what would be some code of good practice or good corporate governance practice to follow in an industry such as this, where one would have a level of expectation of doing good in the broader sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, and thanks, Member Mkondo. We will provide a summary of how we actually assess the organizations in terms of triple BE and what are responsibilities around team code for those entities, Chair. So we will provide it in writing. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that. Minister Bartman, I see you had your hand up briefly.
Thank you, Chair. No, Mr. Burton covered me, because the triple BE wasn't referring to the CSI. It was referring to the assessments of organizations. So as Mr. Bennett was saying earlier, we do encourage that the respective, let's say, organization supports CSI projects where an organization is sustainable and preferably in the area where they're situated. So, for example, if you open up in, let's say, Tygerberg, then, for all intensive purposes, in terms of principle, the harm, for lack of a better word, that you're causing in society isn't in the Tygerberg area. So ideally, what you want is that the CSI of the respective stakeholder benefits the people from the area that they are in. But I'll ask that the board definitely just gets that assessment to the committee regarding the organization assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, on that. I think the committee will just look into that and then make some request in that regard. I think just covering the aspects of complaints. I'm aware of a complaint that seemed to be escalated via the committee, and we then passed that on to Provincial Treasury. So I'm just looking at the whole way in which complaints are being dealt with and being recorded when they are received, and that communication channel that then goes back to the complainant, and the level of almost due diligence that is being done by the board to deal with complaints in a speedy manner, so that there's some resolution that can be had on that. I don't know if we could get some level of comment on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to, Alvin? Oh, no, Robin. I'm going to hand over to Robin again. Robin, just the process around that and this complaints.
Oh. The complaints are received by the office of the board. We do the investigation, and as indicated previously, some investigations takes much longer than the others. While we're talking about 700 complaints that we get in, and the chair earlier mentioned that it averages about 50 a month, we are at the moment averaging, for the January, we are averaging 70 a month at the moment. Some of them can be very frivolous complaints. I mean, we would get complaints about the accounts, not the deposit of 20 Rand, which was paid by vouchers, not being reflected. We almost have to treat it not in the same manner, but in a similar manner, and it does take time. So we would get the complaint, we would review it, we would then send out, before we even proceed, we need to send out documents to the patron. And one of the documents is the patron dispute form, and it's important that this gets completed because it has certain mandatory information. If you don't get that information, you cannot proceed. Coupled with that, it is the copy notification. We then give him a covering letter that briefly tells him exactly what the process is. Once we receive that information, we would then send it to, we would review it and see what information we now need to send it to the license holder. Now, we cannot proceed to send that to the license holder until such time that this office has gotten that is, and we are aware that the individual has read the copy notification. The issue comes where the punter sends an email to the board, or he has a telephone call, and in let's say in January, we send him out the documents. He comes back to us in about March, May. He comes back. Now, it's only at that point in time can we communicate basically with the license holder that this is the issue. Because then we advise the individual that we're going to send you information, circulating information to the license holder. When he comes back to us, and it's at that point in time that the 3 to 6 month period starts and not from January. And a lot of them get very confused regarding that. But I think it's important to note also is that there is something called a patron dispute, and there is called something which has compliance issues related to that. Meaning that if a patron comes to us and he advises us that the license holder needs X, Y, or Z, and he wants to lay a complaint about this is, while we will wait 2-3 months until he completes the patron dispute form, nothing stopping the office from dealing with the compliant, inquiring about the compliant nature of that matter with the license holder. So we treat it as two separate issues as such. But obviously, his patron dispute can only be investigated once he comes to the office. Once he sends the information to the office. Once that has been investigated, it goes through the departments. There is 2 review processes within the department. After that, it is presented to the manager legal service, who then will review the facts. There could be times where one or two, where the manager legal services requires additional information based on how she viewed it, and then that information would be requested, it then gets sent to her. After that, it goes to, she will review the date, and then it gets resolved. Communication sent out to both parties. If either party objects to that process, it will then be presented to the full board, who will then have a hearing with both parties to resolve on the matter, bearing in mind that the board themselves have no party to the dispute prior to this information coming to them. So, in a nutshell, Chair, that is the process of the disputes.
Robin, before Chair, just give me 1 second. Robin, before you, just the Chair refers to this matter that went back to Provincial Treasury after settlement. You just want to.
Mr. Maka, that's what we're talking about.
Just ask the Chair. Chair, is that the one you're referring to?
Look, I don't want to refer to names, but you know, I think there has been in the last few months there've been some sort of repeated correspondence on from one of the complainants.
Chair, if we talk about, let's talk in general, but specifically about this individual. There was a patent dispute lodged with the board. Unfortunately, it came through a period when our resources was not fully focused on the patent dispute. There was some time that it had taken to resolve. Eventually, at the time when we were close to completing the matter, around about August, September 2025, there was a settlement agreement between the license holder and the punter. And the board in no way gets involved in settlement agreement. We must just be advised of that. Once the settlement agreement is there, the matter is taken as resolved by the office of the board. Where the office received the signed settlement agreement by the punter, and we closed off the matter. It was probably about 2 or 3 months later, the punter came back and he said, well, you know what? He wants his matter fully investigated again. It's because he believed he was, I don't know how he felt he was induced to take the settlement. We then advised him that for us, we got this matter closed. So if you want us to relook at that matter, the only way we can do that is if you repay that money back to the license holder, we'll pay it back to the board in trust. And the reason why the board requested that is, should we complete this investigation and we conclude that we conclude in favor of the license holder, then we had wasted our time because there's no way that that punter is going to basically repay that money, the settlement offer back again. And I think it's a waste of already restrained resources on the board to do that. And that is what we've communicated to him. So that is all the punter needs to do is, if he needs to, he say the settlement was not valid for whatever reason, we'll accept that, but we cannot use our resources to work on a matter which may not be in his favor, and he would still get the benefit of the settlement. So that is it. And we don't get cases like that. That is. I can't recall another case having a case like that.
Thanks, Chair. I think that was our responses at this point in time. Are there any other comments or questions, Chair, through you?
Yes, thank you very much for that, because I think that also gives the committee a perspective of well, possibly the nature of some of these complaints that could be levied. I see Member Nkondlo, and then I see Member Stoffel. I'm not sure if there are any further questions, because then, you know, we can probably wrap up after that if there aren't further questions. Member Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, I just wanted to say, appreciating that, I think partly one way that the industry contributes, as the Minister says, to what would be seen as its adverse effects on society, you know, or the harms that gambling may have on people through CSI. I think the conversation that we need to actually have is through the work of the board, and where in particular they are able, you know, to bring evidence of where the programs are done, and is actually to be able to juxtapose between what the companies or the licensees are doing versus indeed the level of negative effects of gambling. I think it's a conversation that we must think about, and one raises this because also, you know, I find just the whole legislative and regulatory environment around this matter very dicey. But secondly, you know, is the fact that if we learn from the liquor industry, there is what I think the province, I'm not in that committee, but I know that the province had actually gotten involved in some work on alcohol harms towards developing a policy that provides a more comprehensive response to the alcohol harms. And perhaps it's a conversation learning from that particular industry on what could be learned by the gambling, you know, to anchor the corporate social investment and try to sort of tighten it, especially in this very constrained environment, particularly with gambling now being online and making it even further difficult to sort of manage its effects because of the access, the broadened access thereof. So I just wanted to make that that comment around the notion of the harms that gambling may have on society, and how you could actually be able to register what is being done through corporate social investment and its impact if any, which can be proven, with that contribution of CSI. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Nkondlo. Yes, I think what perhaps if I'm reading as well, what you're saying is that it almost becomes a self-regulatory type of a process where the industry starts to step up themselves and say, we have a role to play. Member Stoffel?
Thank you, Chairperson. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And let me appreciate the presentation, Chair. Chair, I'm partly covered by Member Kondlo, but then also, Chair, I want to say something about the complaints because I have listened how the response of his Chair to me. Each and every complaint should be handled in an equal way. There's no way we can say, but this complaint, it's a smaller nyana one, this one is big, this one is big. A complaint is a complaint because you don't know how that complaint sits with that person who have complained, who have put in the complaint. So therefore, we have to deal with complaints and take complaints very serious. Therefore, I will then, even for us as committee members, it's unacceptable if a complaint have to circular through the department, whilst we know that complaint can be attended to. I'm not sure whether, Chair, I'm understandable to what I'm saying. It's that the department should look into that and try to limit such events. Because at the end of the day, those people will remain our clients, those people will remain our people who is putting this department where it is today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. I see Minister Bartman's hand.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to clarify something quickly. In terms of the complaints, particularly those that we get through the committee, the ones we've gotten through the committee, we have responded to, both from my office as well as from the board. That's the first part. The second part is the matter that Mr. Bennett was referring to is a patron where the investigation was not concluded by the board, went into a settlement with the license provider. It's the same as when you go to court, you're maybe arguing with someone before the court, and then before the court finishes, the two parties before the court go into a settlement. Because you go into a settlement, now legally, the matter is closed. The board cannot continue with that investigation because the matter is closed because the patron and the license holder came to an agreement. That agreement was sent to the board to show the matter is closed. The patron wants to reopen the matter. Because you've already been paid the money of the settlement, the next step is if you want the matter to then be reopened and for the investigation to continue and to be concluded, you must pay the money back. The board can hold the money in the trust in order to keep the money safe in case the matter is concluded and it's in the favor of the patron. So the money won't disappear. The money will be held safely by the board so that the investigation then can be concluded. But if the patron does not pay the money back in order for the investigation to go forward, there's not much the board can do. Because what happens if the investigation concludes, and what happens if the license holder is the one who's the favorable party in the matter? Because then money needs to be paid back. So in order for that particular matter, and Mr. Bennett was saying that this is not a normal type of complaint that the board gets. So in order for the matter to continue, in order to open the investigation, similar like in court, if you want to go back to court, the first thing the court is going to say is you must then pay the money back so that we can continue the work because the investigation was never concluded. In terms of handling all complaints in an equal way, the board is very much respectful of the respective complaints. However, if, for example, I had to come before this committee and say, I don't want Member Stoffel sitting on finance because I don't like her, that is frivolous. That's nonsense. I can't say something like that. It is Member Stoffel's right to sit on the finance committee because she's a member. Even if she was an alternate member, it's her right to be here. So that, for example, to the chairperson would be a frivolous complaint. So the board does need to be able to distinguish between what exactly is happening in the substance of a complaint. So I will ask the board just to maybe just give some insight into how the substance of a complaint is looked at in order to determine what type of process then is followed in this regard. But I do want to make it just clarify that complaints are treated with the utmost respect. In terms of just on the responsible gambling chairperson, I completely agree with Member Mkondlo. We've been very actively looking at ways that we can address things like responsible as well as problem gambling, separate to the work that we are working on with the national department and the other provinces. The board was indicating earlier that they are working on ways that we can close the gap on between the voluntary and mandatory types of CSI matters. But also they've also have a new responsible gambling post. The CSI that the different industry license holders spend in communities is separate to the levies they pay that go to the board for operations, for example, investigations and compliance and so on. That's also separate to the taxes that the license holders pay to the province, to the provincial revenue fund, essentially, which the board collects on our behalf, that goes back into the provincial budget. So the CSI is the direct matters that the industry spends on the ground in the areas, and that is separate to the levies and the taxes that they are also legally required to pay. And each type of fund obviously is for a different purpose. And those matters regarding responsible gambling and problem gambling, we are currently taking all of those matters into account for a future green paper that we wish to bring, which will aim to reform our provincial gambling legislation. And things like responsible and problem gambling is something that we are currently considering in that future work of ours currently. I'm just going to hand over to the board chair for just substance and how complaints are dealt with on a substantive level. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Robin, on the response.
Thanks, Chair. As previously indicated, that even when we receive a complaint and from the outset, just from the initial email, we could see that this is going nowhere. We still follow the same process. So all complaints are treated in the same manner, meaning that the email has been received. So now they need to complete the dispute form. On the dispute form, there are certain mandatory information that we require. That then determines exactly what process that's going to be followed. Now, there is a distinction between a dispute and a complaint. A complaint generally relates to the service of a license holder. They're taking long to...
Do I just show that? And just put it. Okay. Thanks, Nkosina. Sure.
There seems to be somebody with their mic open. If you could just mute yourself, please.
There is a distinct difference between a complaint and a dispute. The complaint generally relates to the service or the manner in which the client felt they were treated by a license holder. While both matters are investigated, complaints are usually investigated and they could end up, they could be finalized within the compliance department and we could give them an outcome on that. However, in terms of legislation, disputes can only be resolved by the manager legal services. The difference between a complaint and a dispute is defined as a disagreement between a punter and a license holder over the outcome of the game, a gambling related procedure, or a payout. So those are the type of things that generally constitute what a dispute is, and that has to follow a certain process. However, both of them are fully investigated, and like I said, it's the outcome of complaints are generally quicker because it just relates to service and it doesn't really relate to anything of technical nature. But each and every matter that comes to the office of the board gets treated in the same manner. To give an example, a punter would come to us and tell us that their player account was accessed and they believe the player account was accessed by a person who should not have had their phone. Under no circumstances can a license holder be guilty if you are negligent with your player account details, login details. It is no different from having your banking app on your phone. So there's a lot of responsibility that lies on players, and this is one thing that the board is looking at during the course of this year in terms of our educating the public regarding these matters. It's not only about responsible gambling and what it entails, but it's also responsibility in terms of protecting if you are playing, protecting your player account with your username and ID so that people are not authorized to access that, access it, and it results in a complaint to the board. Thanks, you.
Thank you, Robert. Back to you.
Thank you very much. I think thanks for those explanations. I'm just looking to see if there are any further hands. I'm assuming that we have now covered all of our questions, and as I'm not seeing any further hands, I just would like to then, in concluding this session, perhaps just give Minister Bartman an opportunity to close off. I think thank you very much for the presentation and for enlightening the committee on these two important aspects, and we appreciate the efforts that have gone into this presentation. Over to you, Minister Bartman. Thank you very much, and thank you to the team and also to the PT team who've been with us.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to say, just really the board does very hard work, and they're very committed, and I just want to thank them for that work that they do on behalf of our province and of our people. In terms of disputes and complaints, Chair, as always, if the committee has queries, we aim to get answers back to both patrons and the committee as fast as we possibly can. And this often depends on the complexity of a particular query, but we aim to get it response to both as soon as possible where relevant, as well as we will continue working on making sure that we keep up with industry developments, and we do what we can in terms of our role and our ability for making sure that we respond in terms of responsible gambling and problem gambling, and we'll continue working with our colleagues also in other provinces as well as the national level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to you, Minister. And I think at this stage we can then say that the committee is then concluded in the discussions with yourself, Minister, PT, and certainly with the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. Thank you very much for being with us, and you can go and enjoy the afternoon further. No doubt everyone probably has some additional work activities to deal with. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, committee, we'll just wait until everyone who's left the platform who doesn't need to remain with committee, and then we can deal with a couple of our committee administrative matters. Okay, I think we can now move over to any resolutions and recommendations that we may have flowing from this presentation that we have had. So looking at some suggestions there, and then I think we have a set of minutes that we just need to look at and approve coming from our meeting last month. Okay, any resolutions, any further information that we may require? I see Member Brinkhuis and Member Mkondlo.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon again to all the colleagues. Chair, am I audible?
You are audible.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, number one, in terms of resolutions, the gambling machines in Australia, what they've done there is they have put warning signs on the gambling machines. And not just the gambling machines, but even on cigarettes packets. The government has put warning signs there, and they put even pictures on the consequences of excessive smoking and gambling. So that has helped with bringing, you know, the harms of gambling in general and even smoking also. It has brought the harms down considerably in Australia. And in terms of a resolution, I think if you can encourage the board to take this similar steps, then we can see this the same results here in South Africa also. And number two also is that in terms of resolutions, the gambling and the racing board, we must look in long term. We must look into the future for alternatives for generating revenue for the government. We must look at alternatives. For example, there's one alternative that we could be looking at is the halal industry. The halal industry currently in South Africa is reaching the billions of rands. And that can also be a source of tremendous revenue for the government. And it could possibly replace a structure like the gambling and the racing board. So my resolution, my second resolution is that we must look for alternatives. And I've just served you with one, the halal industry, which is already generating billions in South Africa and internationally, globally. The halal industry is doing, is especially in Europe. If you look at halal banking, halal products, different types of products, the demand is just growing by the day globally. So that is something that we should look at, you know, and we should engage the executive and the premier with these alternatives, and possibly we can have a better population here in the Western Cape in terms of our morals, in our ethics, in how we go about with our daily life. Gambling certainly has a huge impact on a lot of people's lives when it comes to the daily life. So yeah, thank you, Chair. This is just my two resolutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Brinkhuis. You know, I think just handing over there to members to try and see perhaps how best we formulate something like that. Member Mkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair. My one, I think one is just to request the information. I think they said they could do a pager just to explain the regulatory and legislative framework that they would be using in their assessment of the licensees regarding their contribution to communities through CSI and other instruments. So one would be interested in understanding that. So if that report could be required. The second one is maybe to check with the board whether has there been any study, whether by the board or, generally, in the industry around the harms, as Minister refers to it as part of irresponsible gambling, but quantify such versus the contribution that the gambling industry is doing, whether through CSI or any other mechanism. Because I think tax from where I'm sitting is what they would be paying like any other corporates are doing in their various, for doing business, as all of us were taxed. But I think for one, we are looking at what becomes, closer in terms of impact in the very harms that gambling, because gambling, I'm sure there are studies that have demonstrated what is its effects on individuals. So for me, I was asking if there's any study that would have actually shown what the gambling industry is contributing it's through its corporate social investment, vis-a-vis the harms to those individuals that end up lending or qualified as irresponsible gambling. I'm not sure if there's something of that nature. If there is, they could share. If not, I think one is okay to just understand that, which is why I was raising the notion of alcohol harms, because I've found that work that was done through the liquor board is much more comprehensive, and I think speaks to that what we term a whole society approach, because it does not only look at what the liquor board can do and the licensees, but also the society, the different departments, what they could do, because other problems indeed cannot be resolved by specific contributions of the licensees, societal problems, which I think requires that whole of society approach. So I think one was just saying, I think it's one of the things that the industry, gambling, can actually learn from the liquor industry in terms of how they are improving, how they would mediate the effects, the negative effects from gambling. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. And hopefully our procedural officer is able to just capture that and certainly deal with that, because I think what is also important there is the extent to which the gambling industry is working to some form of I use the word term self-regulating, but it's in other words an internal form of discipline that they then formulate themselves in terms of dealing with the harms being created by gambling, and the extent to which the social responsibility initiatives are contributing to that. I think what I would also like to see is that in terms of the amounts that are being made available in terms of social responsibility, that we at least get that broken down into the various sectors into which those funds are being made available. On one side, there was reference to schooling, and then, right, perhaps to the other end, to the NSRI in terms of a public organisation. I think Member Petrus was also suggesting perhaps that we should get a list then of who those beneficiaries were making up that total amount. But so I think those were the some of the issues that I noted there. I don't know if there's anyone else with any other ideas. Member Petrus, you had your hand up, just taking that down.
No, no, sir. Chairperson, I support that suggestion and proposal that we need more transparency.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just thinking in terms of Member Brinkhuis, I think I suppose could we perhaps phrase something in terms of sort of an update on the work that is being done to try and introduce and to promote responsible gambling, and the efforts there that are being undertaken to issue those levels of warnings to any persons who do participate in gambling. And then I think the second aspect that you raised that maybe, and we've just got to think in the context of we've just spoken here about gambling, but I think what you indicated, Member Brinkhuis, was the search for additional avenues in which revenue could be generated directly by the province. If we could perhaps just have an update note on various efforts that are being undertaken to explore additional revenue streams for the province. If that will possibly cover some of your comments.
Yes, no, thank you, Chair. In terms of alternatives, yeah, there's a lot of alternatives out there, but like I mentioned, the halal industry is also one. And but there could be a lot more. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. I'm just looking at any other members over there. If everybody is generally in concurrence with the suggestions that have been made. If we can perhaps see a thumbs up here and there, then we'll be happy. Just checking to see whether the thumbs up still work. I see Member Nkondlo's definitely works. And Member Petrus, it is possibly siesta time. I know it is very warm this afternoon. So that's good. I can see there a couple of other smiley faces.
We're all following you. We don't normally do the thumbs up thing, so I think we're just getting it done. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, no, excellent. Okay, so I think that deals with those aspects, procedural officer. Then I think we have our minutes from last month, and then we can consider an iced coffee or something like that. Okay, so those are the minutes for the 17th of February, at which time we got those quarterly performance reports. And I think, what did flow from that was very definitely with the Provincial Treasury took a chance by only providing us with non-financial information because we hadn't specifically asked them for financial information. So, which is a little bit concerning, a little bit cheeky on their part, in my view. And then we had a number of resolutions, actions down there. Was a report on the capital assets, the laptops, and the delay then in spending on that money that we saw at that stage. And there was a report on vacancies, and that we were then also hoping to get some form of update on how many of them would not be filled by the end of the financial year, which is the end of this month. and then a supplementary report on the information in 5.2 from the date of submission to the end of the financial year. Okay, we've referred to that. And then the number of bursaries. So I think that is what we had in those minutes. And if those are acceptable, if we could then have a proposer and a seconder for those minutes.
Proposed, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa. And a seconder.
Bombo, second.
Thank you, Member Mbomo, for seconding that. So I think that then deals with the matters that we have had on our agenda today. And I think with that, I will then adjourn the meeting at 14:20 on today, Tuesday, the 10th of March. Thank you very much. Enjoy the afternoon further. And we'll get ready for budget later in this week. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jay. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.